What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Unbanked Podcast. We have a very special guest today, Head of Strategic Partnership at Litecoin Foundation. We have David Schwartz. David, how's it going?
Good, Jeff. Good. Thank you. Thanks for having me on, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. So for those at home, who is David Schwartz?
David Schwartz. He's a guy who I'm going to talk in a third person for a minute now.
Mm-hmm.
I have been in crypto since about August of 2017. Came from a military background, so I retired from the military in November of 2013. And then I did almost 8 years for the state of Wisconsin as a HR supervisor too. So I've done pretty much like my whole adult life has been government, steady paycheck kind of stuff. Then in 2017, we were between houses, and I decided to take what I had in the stock market and move it over into crypto. And I started out with a little bit of Bitcoin and realized I could not just make a little bit of money off of this, but it was actually really cool tech. And so I started learning more about it and kind of got into, at that time, there was only about 3,000 something cryptos versus 20,000 now. So it was like I got into, the Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ethereum, and started learning about a few other ones that have since sort of faded out. That was the start of my journey. And I really hooked into the whole being in control of your own money, and the fact that the public ledger called Bitcoin was this thing that you could go out there and you couldn't manipulate it, right? It was what it was. And,
It's here to stay.
Yeah, the best thing that I had seen as far as like, this is how money could be without governments being involved, kind of a thing.
Yep.
That really drew me in. And then the differences between Bitcoin and Litecoin, to me, it was a 1-2 punch for me. And I thought that was amazing. And so those have been the two that I've really kind of concentrated on the last few years. So then in 2018, I volunteered for the Litecoin Foundation. It was pretty new at that time. This is February of 2018. And then about 8 months into that, I was brought on to be a project director by Charlie. Probably, I think it was last year or something. We changed the title to Strategic Partnerships because it seemed to fit what I was doing more than prior to that. In between there, I started a company to help support the ecosystem as well. Started what's called Hedge.io. So it's an automated pay conversion company where your pay comes into a direct deposit account and gets automatically converted into what you wanted in crypto and then sent to your wallets. And then also last year got involved in something called LTC gaming, so Litecoin gaming. So in the gaming side of things too. So those are the three things I really kind of concentrate on right now.
We're definitely going to talk about all those things. Before we get into anything, you said something very interesting, that you noticed the difference between Bitcoin and Litecoin. For listeners who don't know, just getting started in crypto, what do you think the biggest difference between those two coins are?
Okay, so I'll give you my personal take on how they're different. Just not necessarily the technicals, because I think we can go over that. Some people have probably heard about that, but from my point of view personally, this is how I view Bitcoin and Litecoin. I see it as a parallel financial system that I use compared to fiat, right? So I can run both of those parallel to each other and go back and forth as I please, right? But whereas in the fiat world, you pretty much store fiat or you put it into something completely different, like real estate or stocks or whatever, but they're not similar, right? Money is money, and then there's all these other assets. But in crypto, the way I use Bitcoin and Bitcoin is my generational wealth that I'm going to be passing on to my children and their children's children and so on and so forth, right? Same thing with Litecoin, but with like half of my Litecoin, it's about spending it too. Because in my mind, if you go back in time, so many civilizations, they've used gold or silver for their currency that they actually make, right? But gold is really hoarded by people. It's not something that you go and use gold to buy a cup of coffee, or you go and buy gold to go and buy a monitor for your computer or something like that. It's something that there's a reason why you would want to, and this is in my mind, there's a reason why you would want to ever use that, or at least use it for leverage to borrow against if that ever becomes more mainstream thing. But Litecoin is this thing where it also has a store of value, just like Bitcoin. Right. And it has a limited amount that's ever going to be created. It has all the same type of, features to it that somebody who likes Bitcoin would like it, but you can spend it and it's more spendable. It's cheaper to send. People like numbers. The lower the number, perhaps the more attractive it is. So if you have a Litecoin that's at like $75, someone thinks of a coin, they think of a whole coin, and a whole coin costs $75 versus $16,000 or $17,000. Just psychologically, you pick up more Litecoin, and then, as time goes by, as that value goes up, there's a higher degree to which you make some profit off of it, right? But Litecoin is this thing where it also has a store of value, just like Bitcoin. right? And it has a limited amount that's ever going to be created. It has all the same type of, features to it that somebody who likes Bitcoin would like it, but you can spend it and it's more spendable. It's cheaper to send. People like numbers. The lower the number, perhaps the more attractive it is. So if you have a Litecoin that's at like $75, someone thinks of a coin, they think of a whole coin, and a whole coin costs $75 versus $16,000 or $17,000. Just psychologically, you pick up more Litecoin, and then as time goes by, as that value goes up, there's probably a higher degree to which you make some profit off of it, right? But then you're able to spend it, and you're not spending your wealth that you're looking to hold on to for when you either retire or to pass on to somebody else. And so those two together, they both have a store of value. I'm really not looking to spend my Bitcoin. It's a little clunkier too. I understand there's Lightning, but it's just clunkier. And if I can do it on a layer one like Litecoin where it's fast and it's cheap, then why wouldn't I use both? And it's basically like big brother and little brother together.
I like that. Does Litecoin still follow the same mechanism as far as proof of work?
Yeah, absolutely. The only difference between them in that respect, and I probably should mention it, but the only difference in that respect is they use different mining algorithms, right? So they don't compete with each other. Bitcoin is the dominant coin on the SHA-256 mining algorithm, and Litecoin is the dominant one on Script mining algorithm. One Bitcoin uses more energy, it's more energy intensive. The Script algorithm that Litecoin still uses energy, but it's more memory intensive. That's how they vary. And they're both at like 98, almost 99% dominance in their hashing algorithms. And so those two are also then the most safest. And having all the similarities that they have on the coding side, and then having very similar aspects on the mining side, yet still not competing with each other. Pretty cool.
That's pretty cool. What is your take on proof of stake versus proof of work?
I think there's places where proof of stake is valuable. I don't know if that's necessarily the case for if you're looking for people's money. Maybe like in the aspect where it's used for creating dApps and all these other things, and that's more of a company or enterprise related type of focus. And so maybe proof of stake is a better way to go. Me personally, I'm really not interested in my money. Maybe for other features and things that's what Ethereum kind of concentrates on, or another one uses proof of stake. I get it, but it's not something I would trust my financial or my fiscal money with.
I like that. Okay. Why do you think that is?
Well, because there's always the opportunity for manipulation. And I suppose you could have that argument for proof of work too, at some degree, if you're talking about mining pools or whatever. I mean, you and I can jump out of a mining pool or jump into one like every 5 minutes if we wanted to. It's not like a mining pool is a solid static thing. It's where you always have that number of people. It fluctuates over time, right? So you can't have that same argument as you would with proof of stake, whereas this is how many coins you have. That's how much of a say you have in what's going on. Totally different, right? So I think it's a little easier to probably manipulate voting or some type of things that occur within a proof of stake system that you wouldn't have in proof of work.
Yeah, that makes sense. I always like having a conversation just to hear different perspectives, because when I talk to major Ethereum guys, they have this opposite argument when it comes to proof of stake versus proof of work. I mean, it's interesting to hear both sides.
Well, I mean, we could always talk about energy consumption too, right? And I'm not necessarily against proof of stake. I just don't really like the narrative wars that go on, because I think you could probably have both function in certain ways where it makes sense, right? But to say one is bad completely or one is good completely is dishonest, right? So with proof of work, it should be something where there's the least amount of ability for bad acting party or individual to do anything to it, because that's my money. And not that I wouldn't want that with what Ethereum is or is becoming or whatever, but at the same time, I can see how proof of stake necessarily isn't a terrible thing. But as far as like energy consumption, fine, okay, maybe it doesn't use as much energy to actually manage it. But if you look at how proof of work has evolved over time, there's a lot of green energy that's used to even mine proof of work. There's arguments that anywhere between probably 35 to 50% of all mining, if not more, is done off of green energy, renewables, right? Or like in the case of Texas, they're helping keeping the grid safe and functioning by having mining involved. So that's something proof of stake couldn't do. So there's positives and negatives for both.
I like that comparison as well. So pivoting over to the foundational piece, why does Litecoin or any blockchain have a foundation?
Well, I think in the case I can speak for the Litecoin Foundation. So obviously it was Litecoin was created and launched in October 2011, right? So around October 13th or so, I believe. And for the first 6.5 years of its existence, it didn't really have a foundation or any type of entity that could help funnel efforts or provide awareness or education or adoption. It was all like super decentralized, right? So as far as that goes, and really it came down to whoever was really, really exuberant about it would probably try and go and ask if a merchant or somebody would try and adopt Litecoin or whatever, or, ask if they're mining companies, mining Litecoin as well or whatever. It was more of an individual type effort. And so I think Charlie and a few other guys, there had one other attempt prior to the foundation that I know of for Litecoin, and it didn't really go over too well. So they started the Litecoin Foundation, as people know it now, in spring of 2017, I believe. It's based out of Singapore, and it's a nonprofit. It's really just based off of donations and goodwill of people buying merchandise on the store or whatever else. There aren't too many funding opportunities through like revenue for the foundation at this point anyway. And I think that's sort of planned, and part of it maybe not so planned, but it's been a good journey the way it's been to this point. How is it different between other foundations or entities within the crypto space? I think because it's coming from a fairly launched, no founder stash, kind of no VCs, none of that stuff. And really, like, it's a shoelace budget kind of thing. It's really literally there to help promote awareness and adoption and education and get it sort of picked up in different areas. There's no monetary goal in mind for the foundation itself to like make money. Are other foundations looking for that? I mean, I'm assuming, maybe, right? But I can, the foundation, the Litecoin Foundation, I can speak of, that's not the goal. It's literally to try and help get it on as many exchanges, as many wallets, as many merchants as possible.
Is Litecoin the only foundation that funds like critical development on Litecoin, or are there others?
I would say probably yes at this point, but that's not based off of like, we want to be the only ones doing it or we want to be the main one doing it. I think it's funny, since I've been with it for about, I'd say 80% of its existence. And even though you keep telling people, hey, look, anybody can create a foundation or an entity or whatever and do these things. And we actually like welcome that. We push it, like create some more Litecoin Foundation like entities or whatever and make this a bigger deal, right? But people tend to look at the foundation because Charlie and some of the other early guys that were involved in it were all part of that foundation. Everybody looks at the foundation to do everything, and so if we're not doing it, then nobody's really doing it. It's kind of like this double-edged sword where it's like, if we don't do anything, nothing's going to happen. If we do something, then people are like, oh, it's not decentralized because you guys are controlling it. But it's like anybody can push efforts for anything, right? So I would say, yeah, probably like we at least push some of the development stuff to happen. So like Mimblewimble extension blocks, that's MWeb, right? That's the optional confidential transactions aspect that Litecoin added last February. So it's been about a year since it went live. The foundation helped spearhead the funding for that. The foundation didn't necessarily give any of the funding to the developer or the developers that were working on it. David Burkett was the main one coming over from Grin, but we helped publicly push for the funding of it. And then Charlie said, hey, anything that's given from the public, I will match it. That's how it got funded. So the foundation itself technically didn't really fund it. We just sort of like organized the funding for it to happen.
Okay. And do you guys coordinate like events, or what do you feel is the biggest challenges you guys face over at the Litecoin Foundation? Is it more so getting more people to develop on the platform, or is it having more people to kind of contribute?
I think one of the biggest challenges is to kind of get our name out in the places where it used to be spoken about a lot, right? It's interesting if you go back and you look at CoinDesk early on, or Cointelegraph, or some of the others. I mean, there was far more mentions about Litecoin or anything else. But over time, as all the different flashy new toys come out and everything else is about a specific narrative, or hey, the focus is on Web3 or whatever else, then, Litecoin just doesn't seem that sexy as a story just because they added the optional privacy layer. It's not even a layer, it's an extension block to the base layer, right? So if anybody knows anything about fungibility or confidentiality, you don't want somebody knowing how much money is in your wallet or how much you pull out of your wallet to give to David Schwartz or whatever. That's personal between you and him, and it's nothing nefarious, but what's the point in somebody knowing how much money you have in your wallet, right? So MWeb took care of that, but you hardly heard a peep out of it, except for the fact that when Korea has heavy regulation and they put pressure on their exchanges, 5 exchanges dropped Litecoin, right? And then everybody was all over it. Oh, they love that part. That was because that's juicy stuff, right? But the fact that it actually came out and is an option for people hardly heard anything. I think for me personally, those are some of the biggest frustrations or things that I see is when there's publicity, it's usually almost like a backhanded compliment versus actually providing real news about something of that magnitude that even Bitcoin hasn't done yet, or any of the things that Bitcoin has done. Many times Litecoin has done it first, either as a test or actually like leading the way and saying, we're going to do this and we'll show you it works. And then you can adopt if you want to, right? So I mean, we're talking SegWit, we're talking Lightning. I think one of the only things really lately is a Taproot where we took that from Bitcoin, which is another thing. So we talked about developers, right? And funding of developers. It's not hard to make changes to Litecoin. So you're not going to see a lot of GitHub submissions, if people know what that is, but that's basically where developers go and put notes out there and whatever else about what they're working on a project. But basically, whenever Bitcoin makes updates, Litecoin just takes that and changes some areas of coding to where it's Litecoin specific and then implements it. So it's not like we need a heavy developer base to even make those changes happen. And Bitcoin's more than capable of doing vice versa, but it's just a bigger monolith of, bureaucracy and other things that go into how Bitcoin does all of its changes. So I'd say lack of positive attention, the misconception about development on Litecoin and how that comes about and who's paying for that. And then I would say probably the third thing, which is usually an elephant in the room when either somebody's interviewing me or Charlie or somebody else, is why did Charlie sell his stash in 2017, right? And so people today still bring that up like he dumped on everybody intentionally or some, like he had all of these coins ahead of time and then just decided to vomit it out on the public, when every single coin he ever had, he actually mined it himself alongside everybody else or bought it alongside everybody else. And then in late 2017, he decides, look, I make a tweet, everybody's buying or selling off of it. I do this, everybody's buying or selling off of what I'm doing. It's not good for a fully decentralized crypto to have everything happening based off of what Charlie Lee sneezes out of his nose. So he's like, I'm going to sell it. And so he sold it, and he sold it at 3 different levels, $96, $250, and $314 for an average of like 205, right? So that is not anywhere near the top, but that's what everybody says. Oh, he dumped all his coins on the public at the top. And then for every day since he sold it, he works on Litecoin literally every day. So I don't understand where there's still an issue with that when you have other cryptos that, like, I'm not going to say their names, but they like push out 1 billion coins out into the market at one time or unlock them or whatever. And, they've been holding them for so long, and that, dumps the price or whatever else. Or you have mysterious people that hold 1 million coins, but that's okay. That's benevolence. That's a cool thing. And let's talk about that in a positive light. It gets to me every now and then, but I think for me right now, be able to get positive attention for the things that Litecoin is doing is probably number one, but that was pretty close number two. That really bothers me.
It's difficult to dissect, because I remember I was reading an article a few years back about the Ethereum Foundation kind of doing the same thing as far as the narrative.
The who?
The Ethereum Foundation, when they sold,
yeah.
I forgot how many tokens they sold or how many Ether they sold, but they sold a certain amount and everybody was calling them scammers and everything like that. But to be honest, they're pushing major developments on the blockchain.
Right.
So
yeah, what did they do with it? They actually used it for the blockchain, right?
Yeah. I think Vitalik said it kind of increased their runway by, I forgot the number he said, but yeah, we need that.
A couple of years at least. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that's a smart move, but I guess maybe it comes down to how you telegraph it or tell people or programmed or people given warning of it or whatever. There's all different kinds of ways of doing that. But I think for this one, if people were to know how much it costs to run a summit, right? So like we have an annual Litecoin summit, and that's one of the ways that we try and get the word out a little bit. And we just had one in October in Vegas. It was the third one we've had. So we've had one in San Francisco. That was the original one in 2018, second one in 2019 in Vegas. And then of course there was a 2-year hiatus because of COVID. And so then this last October, we had the third one in Vegas again. And those cost like $250,000, if you want to try and do one that at least, makes sense and is reputable conference. And so where do you think that money comes from? Right?
They don't want to talk about that. So they don't want to talk about that.
No, I don't even know. Like, I think the Bitcoin conference in Miami, which I've been to the last 2, planning to go on the next one here, and I think it's mid-May, but those that I remember last year reading and seeing that huge bull out front, and then all they just went all out on that conference.
Yeah.
Right?
That bull was crazy. I was there. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, this is insane. How much they paid, and then come to find out later, it was like somewhere between 30 and $50 million
Wow.
to hold that conference, and they didn't break even or something. They came in just a little bit under or whatever, right? You know, the prices of those tickets were insane, right? If you
Yeah.
were trying to do anything, even just a general admission was like $800, almost $1,000. And so we shared a booth with one of our partners there. The amount of that booth was just nuts. So for them to come short was flabbergasting for me. But I think like those things are not cheap. So all that money too comes from somewhere. And a lot of that, many times, Charlie pitches in because he loves Litecoin is his baby. He loves Litecoin and he wants to see it. He's like, I don't even care if we never make money on it. It's a good positive thing to have for the community. So we should probably keep doing this. And so, I mean, kudos to him for doing that.
That's why I love the Web3 space so much. It's very much community driven.
Yeah, I've noticed that. Yeah. NFTs too. It seems like there's quite a, depending on where you go within the community, NFTs is kind of like that too.
Especially in the Ethereum community. It's nuts. Does Litecoin have a smart contract capability?
It does. So there's this thing called OmniLite that came out last year as well too, which, I mean, I've talked to investors. They've been invested in Litecoin for like 8 years and they don't even know these things, right? So that means it's really hard to get the word out that some of the stuff is available. But OmniLite came on board a year and a half ago, I think, something like that. And basically what it does is it allows some really basic smart contracts, some tokenomics where people can do funding through tokens on Litecoin. You can build NFTs on Litecoin. There's a couple of up and coming NFT marketplaces for Litecoin based NFTs.
Wow.
So like Lightverse.io is one. I think there's another one that's coming out called Calicar. Those are all things that can be built on Litecoin too. They're just not as robust right now as an Ethereum or an Algorand or, you know, I mean, even Wax does a lot of fun stuff on NFTs.
I didn't know. That's very interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So it's not just a money for payments. It can be used to create NFTs. It can be used for some basic smart contracts, some token creations. Yeah. OmniLite, what it's called. And it's based off of OmniLayer, which was built for Bitcoin, actually. Sometimes you hear people talk about how NFTs were first being able to be built off of Bitcoin, which is true, but it's just not something they've been pursuing as a real viable, you know, I mean, they're really heavy into this whole commodity digital gold thing and, you know, store value. And that's sort of the narrative that's taken hold of Bitcoin. So, I mean, they're going to need to start that narrative, pushing that narrative more, how it's more flexible and it can be used in different ways. But I think you're going to have other people join that community that are really emphasizing and investing in that before you see it come more mainstream.
Yeah, because we need builders, we need developers, and without developers, there's really nothing.
Yeah.
So pivoting over to you being at Litecoin for strategic partnerships, what do you think are some components that you look for when you're looking for partnerships?
I think the biggest one would probably be, is it going to be something long lasting, a perpetual positive for Litecoin? We get a lot of companies and individuals who will come up with a project and they want the support of the foundation through its socials. The socials are pretty strong. Like Litecoin, the Twitter handle has, I think, almost 1 million followers. The foundation has about 200 something thousand. Charlie has 1 million. A few others have some strong followings, and they want to try and tap into that for their new project, which of course makes them money. And then usually I hear, oh, we've loved Litecoin forever and, you know, things like that. But it's like, where were you before this, right? Your project isn't Litecoin only based. We're just an afterthought, or we're like the 8th coin now that you're adding and you're just going down the list. And so now we're the next one for you to hit up. It was hard for me to see that at first coming in, right? But after a while, you tend to be able to understand the patterns. And so for me, I'm looking for strong, viable, long lasting things that are going to help the ecosystem out, the Litecoin ecosystem. Same thing happened with like sports teams, right? We sponsored the UFC 232, which was like December of 1918, I think, and made some news with that. And next thing you know, I had like sports teams from all over the world getting a hold of me, asking me if the Litecoin Foundation wanted to spend like $4 million on a partnership for the upcoming 2 seasons or whatever. And they'd throw us somewhere on the jersey and do some other stuff. And, you know, at first it was kind of exciting because we're getting noticed, you know, but then after a while you realize they just want your money. They don't really give 2 craps who's on their jersey or who's on their screen or whatever else, right? But I think the part that caught me the most was many of them literally viewed us like a Visa or a MasterCard.
Oh, wow.
And they say us as in like Litecoin, the decentralized crypto that nobody really has full control. Like it's fully decentralized, right? It's just like Bitcoin. And they were looking at it like it was a payment system because that's all they were used to working with was companies who would create something. And so one, they thought there was a large stash of money just for marketing. And then two, they couldn't comprehend in their head that this was something that was for everybody, but controlled by almost no one, right?
Yeah.
So many times I'd have a call with like a major league team or a soccer team from Europe or whatever, and we'd have that discussion, and then I'd never hear from them again, which was fine because we didn't have the money to do that anyway. But
who do you think is the best partner you guys work with, or the most fun partner you guys work with so far?
Oh man, had some good ones. If I were to try and do recent, I'd say probably like Bitmain and Antpool. They've helped create a DAO called LTC Labs that will help fund developing projects. So basically, they're taking half of their mining profit from Litecoin, putting it into this DAO. And then through the DAO, they determine what projects applied could get some funding to help further whatever they're doing, right? So I think that's pretty cool. And then I'd have to say probably BitPay, which I don't know if you watch their statistics or anything, but we got added to BitPay around June, July of last year. And we're now the second largest payment option behind Bitcoin on BitPay since I think last September, October time, something like that. In November, we made up 27.6% of all the payments done on BitPay. And I think the stats for this month were still over 25%, but they do like 70 something thousand payment transactions per month. So
that's really good market share.
If you're talking like 25% of that, if you're doing 60,000 transactions, that's at least 15,000 purchases a month off of Litecoin, right? So, and they're the largest payment processor for crypto in the world. So that's a great indicator for how healthy the pay with Litecoin movement is.
Yeah.
I would say BitPay is a pretty cool partner right now too then.
I want to kind of pivot over to, since we're talking about payment, I want to pivot over to Hedge and talk a little bit more about that. I know you talked about that in the beginning. Can you kind of dive deeper into Hedge and what that is?
Yeah. So Hedge is a automated pay conversion engine that was created by myself and my co-founder, Paul Bradley. We came up with this idea and we're able to put in the right rails in place to where if someone signs up and they get approved for an account, they basically get a bank account open for them in their name. And it's only used right now for receiving fiat coming in and then having that fiat automatically converted. So 100% of the money that comes into this account has to get converted into something. So, but basically, like, let's say Jeff signs up at gethedge.io, he gets approved, he gets direct deposit information that he then gives to his payroll service or his employer. And let's say you get paid $1,000 a paycheck and you want 200 of that to be automatically converted into Bitcoin and Ethereum. So you have 50% of it you want to convert into Bitcoin, 50% of it you want to convert into Ethereum, and you want them to go to specific wallets that you own, right? You go on there on the platform and you say, this is what I want to have the money do when it comes in. So then on payday, $800 goes to your regular bank account, 200 is coming into this new direct deposit that you have. As soon as the money hits, the $200 is converted into whatever you told it to be converted into and sent to the wallets that you said you sent to. And that all happens on the same day as you get paid. You're avoiding the exchange process, you're avoiding a lot of other things, and you're self-custodying your pay immediately the same day in crypto that you get it in fiat.
That is crazy. Is there any like fees associated with it? How does that work?
Yeah, the only fee we have is a flat 1.5% conversion. There's no hidden spread fees from us. There's none of that stuff. We don't play that. So we just tell everybody up front it's 1.5%. It's very highly competitive with anybody that's out there. And if anybody ever tells you a transaction is free, it's not free. So there's usually a spread or some sort of a kickback that's in there. They're not doing it for free. It's a business, so they're making money somewhere. So we just chose to be very transparent and say ours is 1.5%. We're not trying to fleece people. We're just trying to get people to convert and not have to worry about all the other manual processes that are involved in it. And so there's no fee for sending it off, no fee for holding it. If you decide to keep it on the platform, it's just that conversion fee. That's it.
When was this company created?
So originally it was created at the end of 2018, start of 2019, and it was sort of just a baby thought that I had. And then when I met a guy at the first Litecoin summit, he actually had the same idea and sort of had like the starts of it, but it was very basic and manual driven, right? And so if you want to build the scale, you can't do manual. It's got to be stuff where got to be automated and it's got to be able to scale quickly. Hearing his idea helped confirm to me that what I was thinking about was doable. And so just decided to start the business. And then I didn't know how money transmitter licenses work or any of that. I'm an Army and an HR guy. I've never done any of that kind of stuff. So I had met Paul at the first Litecoin Summit and just recruited him to come in and guide us through how does that all work with money flows, charges and kickbacks and all, chargebacks and all the other things that go in through the fintech space. And he's done great. He's guided us through we've been able to maneuver through all this stuff that's going on right now through the contagion crypto space. We've literally avoided all of that because of the way that we've been building out this project. So it's gone really, really well. But that was something that started around end of 2018, start of 2019. And we're very intentional, very slow about how we were doing it. So it's very organic and we don't have like a heavy user base, but the people that use it love it. So
yeah, that's very unique. And it being automated like that to get the stress out the way and being automatically sent to your wallets, that's easy line right there. That's very, very, very good. I like that a lot.
Yeah. And we're very happy with it. We stuck with the main three to start with. So we started with Bitcoin, Litecoin, and Ethereum. We just added USDC a couple months ago because we have plans to try and penetrate, at least give our users access to portals within DeFi, and usually Ethereum or USDC are the way that people move money into those areas or move crypto into those areas. And so we'll start digging into that area as well, DeFi. And so we added USDC. We'll probably add maybe one or two more on our platform personally, but we're able to white label it too, right? So we have wallets and others who have been interested in taking it and turning it into something that they use themselves. And then they're open to all of the cryptos that our rails provide. So they wouldn't have to be held to just, Bitcoin, Litecoin, or Ethereum. Or like, I don't know if anybody uses Ellipal cold storage wallet. I don't know if you ever heard of them, but Ellipal.
Haven't heard of them.
Yeah, so they have a cold storage wallet. They have a widget of ours that's in the platform itself. So when you go to discover new things within their cold storage wallet, like you'll see a widget or a logo for like Uniswap or PancakeSwap and whatever else. And right next to that, you'll see a logo of Hal the Hedgehog, which is ours. That's Get Hedge. Mm-hmm. So if you click on that, then you can go sign up or Get Hedge through their cold storage wallet. So there's different ways that we're able to do this.
And that's a little bit more secure too, because it's automatically connected to your cold wallet.
Yeah. We have people that use Ellipal that have their pay converted and sent to their Ellipal wallet. So I know that it works.
Do you guys have plans with integrating with other cold wallet solutions?
We've discussed with pretty much every wallet that you could think of, but it's funny because at the time we really, like when we started this, we were the only ones that had this solution, but we weren't really we don't have a lot of VC funding. It's always been personal funded or just a few funders here and there. And so like there's Strike, Bitwage, even BitPay, they have a pay option. We all basically go around and talk to all the wallets and say, hey, is this something you'd be interested in? So it's not like we have exclusive access to talk to these wallets. So some of the wallets have chosen to go with maybe, more traditional companies that they've known. It's really hard to talk to Bitcoin only companies. I mean, they literally just tune us out. There's they could care less we even exist at all. That's really hard because some of those long-term companies that we all know and either have bought something from or use or whatever, they stick together. It's hard to penetrate that club.
So man, I have to ask, what are some plans you guys have for 2023? Get Hedge and the Litecoin Foundation.
Yeah, for the foundation, I think just trying to show off that it's more flexible and multifaceted than what people think. Continue to develop MWeb, the extension block, that hides your transaction amounts in your wallet and stuff. We're working on a lighter version of that can be implemented into wallets, so that can be used in wallets that everybody uses. Focusing on a Lightning Network wallet for Litecoin and Bitcoin. So hopefully, I don't know if that comes out 2023 or not, but that's a focus as well. And then just building on some of the partnerships that we already have. And gaming's a big thing for the foundation. So they're 15% owners in a gaming organization called LTC Gaming, Litecoin Gaming. And that's been going really well. We have a team, an Apex Legends team right now that's competing this weekend coming up. So basically, they went through all the challengers time qualifying for Apex Legends. So it's just like in soccer, right? So like you have 16 teams, right? We'll say there's 16 teams. And the bottom 8 teams have to then compete to stay in the league for the next year. And then there's usually other teams that, that aren't in yet that want to, and they compete. Like they'll take the top 8 non-pro teams versus the bottom 8 pro teams and have them compete. And then the top 8 out of those 16 get to be in the pro league for the next year. Okay. So LTC Gaming has a team that is in that finals where it's the 8 pro teams versus the 8 qualifying teams that plays this weekend. And they're expected to be in that top 8. And if that happens, we'll have our first legitimate pro team in Apex Legends. And it'd be the first one ever for any cryptocurrency to have, I think, globally. So that's pretty exciting.
Why was it important for you guys to get into gaming?
I think there's a big focus for gaming and crypto. So like game and earn is a big deal. And I think that's just going to continue to expand. But there's demographic of like 16 to 35 years old. I mean, that's the future of where our finances go in general. Like, what are they attaching themselves to? What are they trying to save in? How do they feel like they're earning what they deserve and whatever else, right? And so a lot of that comes through gaming, right? So like even my son, he's a streamer and he makes some additional money every month on Twitch, right? Doing stuff like that. So it took my wife and I a while to understand why that was, such a thing. And he does great. He's on the verge of making partner and doing some other stuff. And so that's an additional income stream for him that he wouldn't have otherwise, right? But gaming in the regular sense, can you imagine playing your games, earning tokens, and then converting those tokens into dollars and then paying your electric bill?
That whole concept is crazy. That's why I love crypto gaming so much.
That's what we're trying to focus on, things like that. How can we be a part of somebody earning rewards for gaming and then turning that around and actually paying bills with that, or buying, new controllers, or there's so much you can do with it. It's so much insane. And so, yeah, we just need to figure out how to carve something out in that space to be able to do that. But we feel like being part of the gaming space itself is very important, right? Yeah. So in order to legitimize, Litecoin, if someone sees Litecoin as a rewards option or a payment option in their gaming experience, they already have some experience or knowledge of being able to invest in Litecoin because it's already a brand, a name that they know.
The crypto gaming aspect, I think the biggest problem right now with crypto gaming is it's not very fun. There's some games out right now and it's just more
talking about like blockchain oriented games, right?
Yeah.
Those are tough. Yeah, those are tough.
they're tough to get through.
Yeah. So there was a group out of Germany. They created a game called Lightbringer that was based off of the Litecoin. It was built on the Litecoin blockchain. It's an RPG game, right? So it was one turn and then one turn. But you could earn Litecoin as you're playing the game. But it was, those types of things, they become more experimental at this point. It's not something that's going to go mainstream necessarily right away. There's a lot of learning to do still.
A lot of learning. And I think that's the whole beauty of it, man. The crypto, we're still very early. I know we say that every year, but we're still very early in the space. And as we evolve, as we go along, it's going to get better.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like anything else. I mean, if you go back and look at the first games that were Pong, right? I mean, nostalgic wise, it's fun,
Yeah.
And somebody my age, I remember when actually Pong came out and people were like going nuts over it. I was only like maybe 7 or 8 but at the same time, I'm like, what is this Pong? And then, I go down to the general store in my town and the general store had like 4 video games set up. There was a Pac-Man machine, a Donkey Kong machine, there was a pinball machine, and there were a few other things, right? And that was your gaming experience. You had to physically go to one of them. It was the only reason why I went with my parents to when they would go to their Saturday night bowling league was because they had a Pac-Man machine in the back area. When you go past all the guys sitting at the bar and smoking, there is a Pac-Man machine back there. So
as we go along, the experience always evolves, and I think it's harder for people to understand that now, just because technology is so advanced now. They don't understand that it can get more advanced.
Yes, some of it I'm a little uncomfortable with where it might end up going, like where it's in your head and stuff. I'm not a fan of that stuff. Taking for me, I had to physically get in my parents' car in the middle of January and go and watch them bowl 3 games in order to go play Pac-Man. Now someone just throws a VR headset on and they can play virtual poker or they can do whatever they want. But at some point that advances too. But where does it advance to?
Context.
Accessibility. Yeah. Accessibility always becomes more and more personal to the point where it's now like...
Yeah, it's in you. When you think about it, it gets scary, but it's interesting to see.
Oh yeah. You're making history every day with this stuff. So
making history every day. So before we wrap up, I wanted to ask you 2 questions. It's a question I ask everybody on the show. What is it going to take to onboard the next 100 million users into crypto? And the second question is, what is one thing that you think would be cool in the crypto space that you don't want to build out yourself?
Okay. So I think the first one, unfortunately, I believe we're going to need the help of larger institutional type entities that already have a stranglehold on everybody's money, right?
Yeah.
So, you have to be able to see Bitcoin as just another thing in your 401k that you can invest in. You have to be able to probably have banks custody your crypto like they do your dollars. I mean, personally, these aren't things that I would do, but this is the only way that you're going to get the average person who in any other respect was not going to go through the pains and effort to try and get into the space. I mean, for me in 2017, just trying to get a Coinbase account set up was a pain in the tail because the banks didn't want me to. It wasn't because I couldn't do it. It was because it was just so hard to do it. And so a normal person's not going to take that effort if they're just curious. They have to be very intentional in order to go through that process. So it's going to have to get to the point where everything that's successful is pretty much built for like the laziest, least knowledgeable person, right? Yeah. And that's not a knock on that's just human nature. We want things simple. We want it easy. We want it now. How does that happen, right? So that happens with anything that's in our current infrastructure. It has to be a part of your normal life now. Otherwise, we're not going to get those extra 100 million people. And then for the least knowledgeable, it's got to be something where those same entities that we're barking about, we don't necessarily want things to be in their hands, they're educating them. Because right now, they're just telling them negative stuff. We need them to educate them on positives of Bitcoin, the positives of Ethereum, the positives of, all these different NFTs and whatever else. Like, like when you go and sign for a house, you buy a house, would you like that title and everything inside of this NFT? Or, we're going to send you this NFT that if you unlock it, it shows all the things, all the paperwork that was involved in purchasing. That's the kind of stuff where it has to just be normal. It can't be just pushed on people. It's got to be just normal. So I think that's what needs to happen for that. And then that's probably some of the stuff that I wouldn't want to build. I don't want to build that.
Having your title and everything like that, going through escrow process and having that on the blockchain would make life so much easier.
Oh yeah. I mean, ultimately, as much as I probably, the thing that Paul and I solved, ultimately that should be something that could be implemented at any bank, right? It'd be really cool if for any reason a bank goes, we don't want to build this ourselves. Let's outsource it through this company, get Hedge or whatever. We'll do it. It's not for my ideals, not necessarily like I wouldn't do that. I would want to try and do it outside of the banking structure, but that doesn't mean that, my parents wouldn't. Right?
Yeah.
And most people are like my parents. They're not like me. So if we wanted to have a mainstream adoption, you have to build those things for the people that aren't like, not try and keep it all within this echo chamber that we keep doing all the time.
That's true. Because trying to explain what a seed phrase is can get difficult sometimes.
Yeah. Oh, and that's the other thing, right? So like that would be really cool if you just didn't have to have that, but it could be just as secure. Whoever figures that out. Like an email address. I go into Yahoo, I create my own email account and I start receiving emails. It should be that easy.
It's not very easy in the space right now, but we're building, we're evolving. And as we go along, there's going to be somebody that listens to this podcast and hears these suggestions and they go out and just build it. That was my hope for it. So I definitely appreciate that. David, I appreciate you coming on the show, talking with me, spending your time with me. And that pretty much wraps up this episode.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on, man. This is fun.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. So everybody listening, well, before I end it, how can everybody get in contact with you?
For me personally, if you go on Twitter, I'm at DaddyCool1991, and then mostly on LinkedIn as well. So you just look for David Schwartz and put in like Litecoin or something, and that should come right up. There's a lot of David Schwartzes. I was surprised.
When I did my research, I did see a lot that came up. So you're right.
Yeah.
Well, that wraps up this episode. I will see you guys next week. Be safe. Peace.